I don't know who needs to hear this, but perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. We all make mistakes. Today, we're talking about reprogramming the code of perfectionism, letting go of the need to be flawless, and embracing the process of growth, isolation, and a purpose that leads to real greatness. Let's get into it. We're all born inside of this matrix. We're all born in it. So all of us have done this. Yes, there was a time where I was not on this code, right? And to be honest with you, the reason why Malcolm X was so loved was before he was Malcolm X, he was Little Red. Before he was Malcolm X, he was a pimp, he was a hustler, he was a dope dealer, he was at the bottom of society. That's why the people loved him so much, not because he was so pristine and never did those things and never smoked, never drank. It was because he smoked, because he drank and was able to pull himself out of it that the people loved him so much, because they said he was one of us. And if he can do it, I can do it. I remember him dope dealing. I remember him shooting dice. I remember him dealing with hoes. I remember him curse. I remember when he went to prison. I remember him perming his hair. I remember him wearing a zoot suit. That's why they loved Malcolm. And so our heroes. This. I heard this once stated by an anthropologist. Afro-Indigenous people never needed our gods to be perfect. They were fallible beings, divine, but that showed that you could be divine and fallible. In fact, if you look at the Greek gods lost their temper. They would get into it with each other. That's because they took those gods from Africa. That's a whole nother story for another day, another podcast. But initially, it was not necessary, nor, I would argue, humanly healthy to make your deity perfect. And so I'm saying that to say that the key for me making the shift is that I never felt like I needed to be perfect. I didn't feel like I needed to be infallible. In fact, it was not something that I was striving for. I have a story, great story. I haven't told the story on film before, unpack. So
juicy.
So when I graduated high school, I was on the code, the popular society code to go off to college. I went to a little small school in North Carolina called Livingston. It was full of the pastor's children. So for those of us in the Afro-Indigenous community, we know pastors' children to be some of the worst behaved children out there. Right? And it was a school full of them. So there was every sin under the sun happening at this school, this college of children. I stayed there. I lasted 2 months. Came back home to Denver, and I was lost. I wasn't in college. And so I started running the streets. And I was drinking 40 ounces. I don't even know if they make 40 ounces anymore. But for my younger listeners, they used to serve beer in 40-ounce bottles. And Mickey's, Oldie, you'll hear about them in all the Ice Cube and NWA rhymes. Like, drinking a 40 ounces just what I would wake up in the morning and buy 2 of them and go throughout the day drinking them. And I was on Colfax and High Street, where there was this arcade that was there on Colfax and High. And I would go there every day and wait for my beeper to ring. And one day I'm playing the video game in the arcade, and I see myself in the reflection. And I heard a voice in me say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" That day, that moment, I stopped drinking. I got up out of that arcade. I left. I threw my beeper away. And I told myself that I was going to go back to school. A year later, I was at Howard University. the rest is history as far as the people that I met at Howard that allowed me to do the things that I did, including move to Africa. I met people that I never would have met had I stayed in Denver and stayed in that environment that I was in. My total trajectory was shifted. The moral of that story is that you are there. In Ghana, there's this saying called Jenyame. It's a symbol, a Dinka symbol called Jenyame. And along with that saying is a saying that says, Nyame, God, Woho, is here. God is here. And it's meant to indicate, this symbol is meant to indicate that wherever you go, no matter what circumstance that you're in, God is present in that moment. God is here. And so in that moment when I was in that arcade, God was in that moment speaking to me, get your black butt off of this chair, stop drinking this poison, and go be on purpose. Everybody has that. Every human being has that encoded inside of them. And so what we have to do is to begin the practices and the habits that allow us to peel back and allow Nyame Woho, allow God to be present.
I can imagine that somewhere in that transition for you from the arcade to who's sitting here, and somewhere in that transition from Malcolm X, there was this period where you're not yet a prophet. So my question for you is, for people that are in that process of transformation, they've heard the voice and the call.
When you decide to listen to be on purpose, you will go through a period of isolation. Malcolm X's period of isolation was when he went to prison. And this is why I say people need to read the biographies of people that they admire, because then they will see that there's a common theme. Before Nelson Mandela rose to be a world leader, he spent 27 years in prison. Yeah. For me, my period of isolation happened when I moved to Africa. I moved to a small town called Takoradi, which is 2 hours away from the capital city. It was a rural area. I moved from Denver, Colorado. McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, lights, to Takoradi, which was a small fishing town. We didn't have television. The lights would go on and off. Our children were raised in the yard that we had. I was totally isolated for a 2-year period of time where all I did was read as entertainment, right? All I did was engage with nature. I had a herbalist that would walk me around through the forest and teach me what the plants were. That's what I did for 2 years. So I didn't know then what I know now, that was part of the process of pulling me out of the matrix, right? There's that part where Neo gets pulled out of the matrix, and then he comes to be with Morpheus, and they are isolated on the ship. He's not interacting with the matrix anymore. He's isolated on this ship. Every person will go through that cocooning period. This is why you should read the biographies of people that you admire, because what you will notice is that every person that is moved into greatness goes through this period of isolation. This is why you should also be suspicious of who the system gives you to follow as being popular. Because if people who are popular are never isolated, right? They're kept in the public eye. They're kept up front. They're kept tap dancing so that you always give the monkey a banana so that they're never, and something to play with, so that they never have the time to reflect on, what am I doing? I have to tell you this. So I'm watching a clip, and all these boys that were doing trap music, they are now 5-10 years older, and somebody recorded 4 or 5 of them talking about, what the hell was I rapping about? I was rapping about the destruction And they're crying, like I'm talking about thugs, tattoos all on the face and neck, and they rapped about murder. But now they're sitting here bawling because now they've had enough time to reflect on what messages, what have I contributed to? And so anybody who's hearing my voice, learn to be comfortable with being isolated. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for hanging out with us today. And here's how you can get on code with what we talked about. Today's major takeaway: perfectionism is a false code that keeps us stuck. True transformation comes from when we embrace our flaws, trust the process of growth, and allow ourselves the space for reflection and isolation to rediscover our purpose. Your uncode exercises in 3 steps. 1. Acknowledge the voice. Reflect on a moment where you've heard an inner voice calling you to something greater. Write down what it said and how it made you feel. If you haven't experienced this yet, consider what areas of your life feel misaligned with your purpose. Step 2, embrace the isolation. Identify a habit or an activity you can let go of to create more space for self-reflection. Use that time to read, meditate, or explore nature. Commit to spending at least 1 hour this week in intentional solitude. And step 3, redefine progress. Write down one area in your life where you've been striving for perfection. Replace that expectation of perfection with a focus on growth. For example, instead of, I must succeed at this immediately, shift to, I will learn and grow through this process. Remember, transformation is messy, but it's also beautiful. Make sure you go and follow us on all of our social media handles to share your journey, ask your questions, and connect with a community that's about breaking codes and building thriving lives. Until next time, stay on code and stay thriving. This is H Soul, and I'm out.